So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. Period Yirmiyahu the prophet, we find in the 61st chapter, very important, the time of the restoration and reduction, because then with this period of time we can establish then the time of the dragon. So then when we read the instructions, when we read either the spring feast or if you read the autumn feast, we can understand where each of those understandings they belong. Precisely as Yohanan, when he was in the first holy city, he organized each of those Megillas precisely. So let's understand the situation after the completion of the spring feast. The Messiah ascends, he gives the order to his people, and then the understanding is there is a time of transition from the first and second tabernacle services. Yohanan then in the first holy city gathers the entire understanding from the first tabernacle service and the transitional time documents of then the dispensation of Ruach HaKodesh. Yohanan then updates the entire instructions with the spring feast, and he is given then details of the autumn feast. Then the other 7 cities of Asia Minor get straightened out. As far as we understand, they were in sin. Then they were taught properly. Then it starts the relationship of Gentiles and tabernacling until 1009. 1009, then the first time the tomb was destroyed, because the Muslims came to Jerusalem and they destroyed the city and they destroyed the tomb. Thus then starting the time of deceit until 2009. So then we find ourselves understanding then the many facets of, for instance, Nahashatan. We find him then as deceiver, then we find him as dragon, then we find him as destroyer. So when the situation is started in the Garden of Eden, first came out then Lucifer, then he became the adversary, or Satan, or then Nahashatan if you include serpent. Then you understand the serpent coming through the ages, and then you find the Messiah then confronting the serpent in the desert. Later he became deceit. Then at this time he is the dragon. When the autumn feast starts, then he is the destroyer. So each of those periods of time we have the understanding. So then, as far as we can understand, this time is a time of the restoration of the holy cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. Then we find in the land of Cush, northern Sudan, the place of tabernacling. The main situation at the moment is, we understand Daniel, the 11th chapter, gives us very plainly the kingdom of the north, Soviet Union, and the leader of the kingdom of the north is Vladimir Putin. He is in charge of the entire kingdom of the north. The kingdom of the east, the person in charge is Mr. Xi Jinping. The south becomes a problem. Africa, we do not have the leader of the entire continent of Africa as the kingdom of the south. We do understand then the land of Cush and the Nubians, many years and centuries ago, used to have the black pharaohs. We must establish yet who's going to be the pharaoh of the entire continent of Africa. It must be established. As we understand, there is only one pharaoh. Throughout the ages, throughout the understanding of Egypt, for instance, there is only one pharaoh. There is only one king of the northern kingdom, there is only one king of the kingdom of the east, and must be only one king of the kingdom of the south. Then we understand the statue of Daniel, the head of gold, king of Babylon. Then you find the Medes and the Persians. Then you find then later Alexander the Great. Then you find then the Roman Empire. So each of those phases gives you very precisely a leader of a time. This time the most troublesome area is Africa, because we don't know who is going to be Pharaoh. We must establish these, so then there is absolutely no mistake as far as Daniel the 11th chapter. He must have a representative of the entire continent of Africa. So then you find raw materials from the south, you find equipment from the north, and you find the factory of the east. These working as a team becomes then dragon. Dragon at the moment, it's not pejorative, or it's not an evil name. Let's understand. Dragon means precision. Evil then is another situation. As far as the deceitful time, or the time of deceit, was gone. You can't render anymore devil. Devil no longer exists. His time of devilish, or then mockerish, or then deceit, those times are gone. We are during the time of precision, time of the dragon. And it's given us very precisely then the kingdom of the east with a system that is very precise. It's a computerized system. It does not mean it's evil. But the times when we read the holy instructions, then we understand what it means Gentile level concerning distinct times and seasons. It is the utmost importance of discovering who's going to be next Pharaoh. So then the relationship with the kingdom of the north, kingdom of the east, and kingdom of the south can be then established. Very important. Because not only this, then tabernacling is restarting on the land of Africa. That's why then myself going to the land of Sudan, trying to find a holy site, so then tabernacling can start. However, along with this, as tabernacling then is completed, at least the first holy city of the time of restoration, then a Pharaoh must be established. Because those times of the African continent, where they found themselves many centuries ago being led by a Pharaoh, those times are returning. And we must find, discover what this truly means, and then electing this person a representative of the kingdom of the south. Requires then tabernacling first, because has to have some guidance on how then many countries of Africa should act as they understand and elect their Pharaoh. It must have tabernacling. That's why we find very wisely the Messiah then himself came out of Jerusalem, and he was then tabernacling, and he is tabernacling. So when you read Yeshayahu chapter 1:8, you find then in the land of Cush tabernacling. You find the inhabitants of the land, and you find the service people, you find the heathen. However, let's make it very clear, tabernacling is not going to take over the entire continent of Africa. Tabernacling has its own leadership. Tabernacling is leading tabernacling. The main understanding is establishing the city and then more cities, as they take care of their own cities. However, as an extra, those interested in finding the future and what would be the best for them, they can inquire at the holy cities and receive only guidance. Those are not orders. You, as then a Gentile, can either understand the instructions, understand the prophecies or local prophecies, not instructions prophecies. Those are already given. But then areas of the future where it would be the best for those nations making inquiries. However, those cities are not going to give orders. Absolutely not, because it defeats the purpose of tabernacling. Those people interested, they will understand. Those not interested, they won't bother. However, they are going to be very busy, because the world is truly shifting from the 1,000 years of deceit and the new system coming where people barely are going to have any time. There are people, and scores of people, spending time on the computer 24/7. It's a time where the whole world can experience what America was during the time of the 50s. Extremely busy. So then tabernacling governs itself. As an extra, they can also help directing the Gentiles if they ask. If they don't ask, they do what they want. So then, based from this understanding, because of the sensitivity of the African continent, tabernacling must be in place, so they can decide who's going to be the next Pharaoh, so they can be governed as they used to be governed. Because a time of restoration. You find the Soviet Union used to be Soviet Union in the past, wasn't it? If you study Daniel the 11th chapter, you find then the Soviet Union returning, but not as the former, but higher than the former. Since they have partnership with the socialist country of China, so they are going to become socialist at some point, but not as it was before in the past. So then the scripture is being more clearer and more vivid, so then we can understand step-by-step formation as then when tabernacling then starts. Very important. So then we can establish then obviously the engine of the system prior of the main system coming in the next 36 months. And then there is an engine going with it. You find tabernacling, then you find the Pharaoh, representative of the kingdom of the south, or a person representing the entire kingdom of the south, either as a title of Pharaoh or as a person representative of. There must be only one representative. It can't be many. Because the delineation comes from the entire statue. Each of those metals, they have a specific representative. So there is a person in our modern days over there in Africa where they're going to decide who is going to be the next leader of the African continent. We understand they are countries. Understandable. But we have to understand that the scripture, the holy instructions, considers the entire continent of Africa as the kingdom of the south. When you understand kingdom of the south, you must have a leader of the kingdom of the south, as there is in the north, as there is in the east. So then we must work through these areas and understand what it means. Then, not only this, comes then the engine of the system prior of its releasing of the entire world. So then the people can start their trades via the Chinese system. Until then, those areas must be defined. Tabernacling and also then the representative of the kingdom of the south. So let's then understand from the instructions what it means. Because the Africans must work together as a team and find a representative, a person representing them as the leader of the entire continent. So then the statue of Daniel becomes then intact as it was. Kingdom of Babylon. Then you find the Mede and the Persians. You find each time there is a king or representative. You find then later Alexander the Great. You find then the many Caesars that came out. Then you find obviously during the time of our time of the Restoration, where you find then iron not mixing with clay. Yet you find the relationship amongst the kingdoms of the base of the statue, where you find then obviously the 11th chapter of Daniel. And then as this engine then starts working amongst themselves, you find raw materials, planner, and factory. When these are in conjunction working together, when the time comes, then the system becomes available for the rest of the world. Then you can expect from there, from this understanding, then the 7 holy cities of Asia Minor. Those must return. And many other holy cities, as many as the Creator decides. So then the plan of the future is given. Now the situation is going over there in northern Sudan and finding the holy site. So then afterwards then the representative of the African continent, the southern kingdom, then can be established. So from steps of formation we understand then the statue, kingdom of Babylon, gold. Then you find the silver, Medo-Persians. Then you find the bronze, Alexander the Great. Then you find the legs of iron, Rome and its many Caesars. But there is a leader of a time. There is a leader of a time. You find a span of, for instance, the Roman Empire, 400 years. Each of those times you find a Caesar. So you did with the pharaohs. So let's understand then how this is going to play out, because it's extremely important, and the rest of the world to work. They're going to be so busy with their work they won't be able even to count the time, because governments are going to be obsoleted. Only these kingdom of the east, north and south are going to have the say-so during this time. However, let's leave some time and some space for then the sons of Ishmael, related with the layer of the Gentiles later, where then decide then who is going to get crude, who is not going to get crude. Because then comes the first son taking its place in history. And then we find Tabernacling work together with them. So as the first son first helped the second son, then later the second son helping the first son. So then we understand where we are at as far as the holy instructions are concerned. And let act as such. But the next step is finding the holy site in the land of Cush, northern Sudan. It should not be an alarm. It's a simple plot of land, and then from there establishing tabernacling. Plain and simple, as used to be during the time of Yohanan. The details were given, the instructions were given. They know what to do. Pitch the tent and do what the Messiah told them to do. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe this, do and observe, then the Messiah is in the Holy of Holies. Simple, in plain. From there, then we find the set apart, then going to Jerusalem very often during the time of the Holy Mikras, or the Holy Feasts. And then, as they go up to Jerusalem to observe the feast, to do the pruning. Then the pruning means they're going to take away the junk, or then the blind side of the nation is going to become then clear. they won't be blind anymore. So from the first holy city, they take a hike over there up to Jerusalem, and they're going to start teaching the people. And Jerusalem is going to be the very last place. So then there is a lot of teaching that must be done, but those are going to be done straight from the set apart. Gentiles, they barely going to do this. The Gentiles, they do Galah, and they Galahing other people. That's the part of the entire understanding of Tabernacling, where the Gentiles are the testifiers of the Messiah, or on behalf of the Messiah. But the Gentiles then Galah the Gentiles. So the whole plan then is very much set, and we must then understand the instructions and then act as such, because the next step is the land of Cush.